we're back for round 2! Last year, I looked into, as the title would suggest, some of the best and worst licensed kids games. Now, I'm not one to try to catch lightning in a bottle with a sort of sequel video, but that is precisely what I plan to do. Although, in my defense, this topic warrants further discussion as there was a plethora of games I missed out on the first go-around. So, I don't know, maybe we can make this a yearly occurrence, maybe not? Plus, this is a fun topic for me to cover, as it allows me to play the good, the bad, and the absolutely awful pieces of garbage in one video. So, I'm not gonna beat around the bush any longer. Let's get started.
Hello, I like money.
This screams licensed kids games. Ducktales for NES was strangely high quality and successful. Being built on the Megamind engine, it followed a similar structure to that game, with being able to choose any level you want and tackle things in any order. The NES game is iconic for both its unique gameplay and music. In 2013,
The Office of President of the United States.
Capcom released Ducktales Remastered for the 7th generation of systems. Now, these are the remakes I like to see. Ducktales, while a classic, is still an NES game at heart and runs into many dated design flaws. WayForward was tasked with this project, so let's see how they did. And yes, before you asked, I played the NES original for the sake of review. Now legally, immediately by looking at the footage, the visual makeover this game received is evident. The 8-bit sprites have upgraded to buttery smooth 2D animation, which looks great. It seems like a logical evolution, especially since the original felt like being able to play a cartoon. The same can be said here, except with a much more modern and HD feel. The way in which WayForward reimagined many of the classic enemies is no small feat. In addition, having Scrooge visually appear the same as in the cartoons is appreciated instead of his red coat he wore in the 8-bit classic. So while most things look great, I'm not a big fan of the 3D objects and environments. This might be a controversial opinion, but I feel like they dropped the ball regarding the integration of 3D. It's weird too, as in some levels, such as Transylvania, I think the background and surrounding objects fit very well. Conversely, objects and environments just don't look great in levels like the Amazon and tutorial level. It's a mix between the low poly feel and the 2D characters not always looking fabulous in contrast to the 3D environment. Again, this might not be a popular opinion, but it's a visual choice that raises some eyebrows. Something that made a nice smooth transition was the music. The remixes of the original games' themes are all great, and the game even gives you the option to listen to the NES games' soundtrack. Isn't that nice? The level design is essentially the same. There are a couple of exceptions, such as more involved grandiose bosses, but if you've played the original on NES, the levels will feel right at home. However, this is when one of the most controversial debates comes into play. How much should a remaster change from its original? This is a question that has taunted modern-day game designers for years now, and man, is there no one correct answer. It's weird, because if you change too much, people are going to complain that it feels too different from the original and that too many liberties were taken. On the other hand, if you don't change enough, the experience can feel dated and stuck in the past. Ducktales Remastered falls into the latter, but it didn't have to. I don't think the level design is awful, but modernizing the experience would have refined the overall package. For one, certain sections just aren't designed well, considering the moveset and controls of Scrooge. Couple this with the fact that after 3 lives, you'll have to start right back from the beginning. I know that WayForward wanted to keep a certain level of old school difficulty in this game, but if I get to the final boss and die, is it good design to force the player to undergo the same level they just played? I'd argue and say no. This lack of update plays into the game's most significant addition, the additional story. The original had story cutscenes, but they play a much more substantial role in this game. While I have the utmost respect for the voice talent and writing in this game, I mean, bringing back Alan Young is anything but extraordinary.
I just wanted to say that Danerade gets no bitches.
Seeing these characters interact is fun, and it gives veterans an incentive to play the game. However, there does come a certain point where it becomes obscenely repetitive to interrupt the action constantly. Things can sometimes feel incredibly slow, simply because the game has to pause all the action just to lay out the current situation that your 8-year-old brain probably figured out already. Sure, you can skip these cutscenes, but you know how usually skipping cutscenes is delegated to the the options button, and the little icon might appear like, click again to skip this cutscene. Nope, not in this game. You'll have to go into the menu to skip every single individual cutscene. Calling them cutscenes is a little too positive of a connotation. They're more like interruptions. As a result, the pace of the game overall is brought down considerably. This was one of the first things I noticed when playing the NES version. It played much faster and snappier. There were no long cutscenes, and even if you were to die at the end of a boss, think about it. Because of the quick pace of the original, it's much easier to jump back into the action and quickly get through the early portions of the game. It's a shame that this game is so close, is so good in so many ways, and yet it falls utterly flat in execution. Sluggish is the best word to describe Ducktales Remastered. They missed an opportunity to attract both new, younger gamers and veteran fans who played the original. This game is not bad, but I might consider the original over the remake. Play it legally and with save states, and you'll be on your way to enjoying one of the 80s' best platformers. Aladdin on Sega Genesis is the third best-selling game on the Genesis. Let that sink in for a minute. Now, Aladdin is my favorite movie of all time. Shocker. So I was excited about playing this game, and I have some not nice things to say. It's weird. It's complicated. Let's just get into it. Right off the bat, this game visually holds up incredibly well. This was largely due to Virgin Games' partnership with Disney, which allowed them access to Disney animators who could draw up the animation for the game frame by frame. That alone makes this game feel larger than life, thanks to the silky smooth animation. Sure, we can achieve advanced and smooth pixel art like this now, but with a much more limited technology and skill back then, it was a technical achievement. The music is also great, with catchy renditions of the original movies' songs. It's really good Genesis music. What else do you want me to say? The real debate about this game is the gameplay. Sure, it visually and sounds excellent, but this is still a 90s platformer at its heart. A hard 90s platformer. Look, I'm up for a good challenge, but I assure you some additional development time surely could have gone a long way. Aladdin has a couple of tools at his disposal. His main attack is his sword, which may seem a little uncharacteristic considering he only used a sword at the end of the movie, but talk to anyone who played this game and they'll tell you it's the coolest feeling ever, so no complaints here. Yep, it doesn't get much deeper than that. The sword is fun to use. Aladdin can also lob apples, which is a nice way to combat enemies who might be harder to beat in such close quarters. They're also limited, which forces players to use them sparingly. Regarding level design, the first few levels were quite strong. Climbing the city of Agrabah and venturing through the desert felt both adventurous and challenging. The first boss of the game is Gazim, which, shouldn't he be dead because he bit the dust? Things begin to take a turn for the worse, starting with the dungeon level. The crampedness of the enemies and obstacles is a severe issue, especially when your primary course of attacking is close combat. Whether it be the bats, wrecking balls, insta-kill skeletons, it can sometimes make things feel out of your control. This is in tangent to the tad confusing level design. The use of blues in both background and particular foreground objects creates disillusion with the action. The next level has us within the Cave of Wonders, and this one isn't as egregious as the last, though if you want to talk about underwhelming boss arenas, I may have found a top tier candidate. Escaping the cave is next, and yep, some of this platforming is not so good. Part 2 of Escaping the Cave is a carpet ride section, with dodging the fiery waves of lava, and at first, when playing this section, I thought it would be fair due to the genie's hand indicating you in the right direction. However, it gets faster and faster, and I hope you're getting just as dizzy watching the footage as I was playing it. Sometimes the game just trolls you by going, I don't know. So what might seem like a fun callback to one of the movie's most epic scenes, in reality acts as a lives killer. The next level makes up for the last by going inside the lamp. It's definitely a deviation from the movie, but it's whatever because the level consists of jumping around on genie-related stuff. That's fun! There are plenty of references to Friend Like Me, great visuals, fun to play, it's very well balanced. I'll skip to the final level, Jafar's Palace. I think the level is fine, but that final boss man is so underwhelming. Jafar just kind of throws you around, which is super finicky by the way. He'll turn into his snake form, which he is barely taller than Aladdin, so disappointing. And as far as I can tell, the only real strategy is just throwing apples and jumping a lot till you win. A bit of a weak way to end, but overall, Aladdin on Sega Genesis has definitely aged in some aspects, though its charm and appeal can bring out the best in a hardcore gamers who are up for a challenge. I want to point out that I am 100% aware that Aladdin on Sega Genesis is radically different from its counterpart on the Super Nintendo. However, I've played the SNES version, and it's good.
Hey kids, did you know that Danerade has a Discord server? Well, if you didn't, I am now going to walk you through an everyday conversation in the official Danerade server. A video about Danerade's favorite game, or Danerade's favorite games. Danerade's favorite game is UGG. My face when bad grammar. The apostrophe can represent a contraction of a word, or one's possession of an object or idea. Even in possessive, it doesn't work. Danerade's favorite game would be correct, unless he's saying that Danerade's favorite game is possessing something. Grammar police. Wow, what a fun world to live in. Link in the description. I don't have a gun pointed at my head. Did you know that Danerade has a Twitter too? Wow! Please follow Danerade. Also, while you're already on the bird site, why don't you follow me?
This game is bad. Garfield Kart is the start of our awful games list, and it doesn't get much better from here. This was originally a 3DS game, and I think I played the better version actually. The 3DS original is awful, and it should be evident by the footage you are watching that things look like they're barely functioning. How did some company slap a $30 price tag on this and call it a day? Yes, you heard me right. The original release for this game was priced at $30. Jesus Christ! On Steam, you can get it for $5, which, just buy Among Us or something at that point, I don't know. Garfield Kart falls into the trap of many other licensed kart racers who instill the same feelings of, I just want to play Mario Kart. If your customer at any point says that sentence when playing your game, mission failed. These games are just the poor man's Mario Kart, except Wild Animal Racing. This one gets a pass. It all comes down to the jaggy and simply inferior feel. For example, drifting in this game feels like sliding on ice, but if the ice died halfway through its life, it barely works. If there are any Garfield Kart experts out there, please tell me what I am not understanding. Not only do the controls feel rough, but the visuals are underwhelming to say the least. It probably doesn't help that playing this game at such a high resolution makes it so that all the imperfections and general sloppiness of the game shines nice and bright. We got item boxes, my bad, candy that'll give Garfield power-ups and also diabetes. What do the power-ups do exactly? I don't care to explain them, so moving on. We got multiple playable characters, including the titular character, Garfield. John. I hate John! There are some others as well. They're based on the Cartoon Network show that was released about a decade ago or so. At least the playable roster is more diverse than that of Mario Strikers Battle League. The tracks, on the other hand, are boring beyond belief. A desert, a forest, a city, a farm. At least in Mario Kart, the Mario-themed characters and environments bring life to the tracks. Here though, I don't know, maybe I missed some Garfield fan service or something. I'm not too caught up in the Garfield lore, but really, everything about this game screams rushed, bland, and boring. There's not even online play, which I don't know why you'd want to play this game with your friends unless you want to torture them. The option would have been nice, considering kart racers are typically multiplayer games. In fact, this game doesn't just exclude online, it lacks any multiplayer modes. So when you buy this game, you'll just have to deal with the fact that you are the only one who can suffer alone, all by yourself. Megamind was always one of those movies that, on the outskirts, looked like your generic 2010s kids movie with no substance, which it was anything but that. Upon deeper analysis, Megamind is a complex story on the relationship of generic good versus evil stories that gets flipped on its head through complex relationships and character arcs. Too bad the game isn't as deep as the movie. In traditional oblivious Danerade ways, I ordered the Wii version and thought nothing more. these are two different games. Why do Wii games have to be so different and weird? So instead of listening to me play a 2.5-hour Megamind campaign on the 360, you're just going to watch and listen to me complain about this crappy team-based fighting game. Our friends over at THQ Australia made this fantastic game. You know what that means. When in doubt, Australia. This is both a cooperative and competitive multiplayer game with a fun cast of characters to choose from. I'll just go with Megamind though. My name is P-Gay! We start with an oddly good-looking pre-rendered cutscene, which, take note of the prefix in the word pre-rendered. Shortly after an in-game cutscene begins, I'm reminded why jumping from pre-rendered to in-game cutscenes is a recipe for jarringness. We get little character animations and introductions, and I guess they gave up on animating the facial expressions. Generally, the gameplay revolves around defeating enemies with your weapons and attacks to gain points. Every player is trying to compete against one another. The player with the most points accumulated by the end of the round wins. This game is going for a Mario 3D World cooperative competitive system, the only difference being that it was an addition in tangent to the base experience of getting to the end of each level. Here though, your motivation is driven by the will of your friends playing this game. Do you guys want to play Megamind Mega Teen Unite?
What the hell is that? No, we're playing Wild Animal Racing.
And with that explanation, I think it is evident that this game has an apparent gameplay flaw. It doesn't really change. The core objective is always the same, with a couple of exceptions. The enemy type isn't varied either. They just use these fat-looking construction workers for the bulk of the game. Not to mention, any real strategy and skill is tossed chiefly out the door because, what? Do you think a licensed kids game on the Wii is going to have intuitive controls and a compelling campaign to use those intuitive controls well enough to carry an entire experience from start to finish? If you said yes, wow, you're dumb! This game could have used some more time in the oven to develop the gameplay better. I say that like this game had potential, but this is usually the fate of most licensed kids games. When choosing this year's all-star lineup for which licensed kids games to talk about, I had a pretty clear idea as there were a lot of no-brainers I left out of the last video. However, for the final game, I wanted some kind of cartoon representation, specifically a Nicktoons game. When I initially thought of this, I had imagined those Nicktoon party games, and I say it like it's plural. Yeah, there was only one I could find. Maybe it's the plug-and-plays I talked about last time that are still in my memory. Upon that discovery, I quickly learned that there was a whole batch of Nicktoons story-driven games that completely slipped under the rug. The one I picked out was Nicktoons Attack of the Toybots. It was also the one Viddy suggested, so thanks Viddy. The story is that Professor Calamitous, voiced by Tim Curry. To do this, he combines fairies, Krabby Patties, and ghost energy to power up his evil toy robots. Oh no! In the process, he captures the Nicktoons, and we'll have to save them. Later, we meet a worker of his, Chadbot, and I wish I could say I'm making that name up. The Nicktoons go to Chadbot and tell them about the professor's evil plan. Chadbot basically tells them that he'll help them if they can collect enough master models to him, which are these trophy or figurine things. Look, it's rather stalkerish and weird. And yep, that's the story. Go out and save the Nicktoons and fight the killer Toybots. While watching these cutscenes, it was immediately noticeable that, to my knowledge at least, most of the original voice actors came back to voice their respective characters. Certain licensed games don't get that privilege, so I'm happy to report this. That's also one of the better aspects of the game, the writing. I mean, it's not very deep, but they try to have some fun interactions between all the characters. This opportunity doesn't come very often. They even brought in Talk. Yay! You remember Talk and the Power of Juju, failed Nickelodeon show, you know. I suppose they thought it might have boosted interest in the IP if they put it in their new Nicktoons crossover game, though I feel SpongeBob meeting up with Jimmy Neutron is much more impactful than Timmy meeting up with Talk. Visually, you'd think the art style would go for a more dynamic approach considering this game is based on cartoons, which, for one exception being Jimmy Neutron, had bright, vibrant animation. I hope you're in the mood for muted and rusty looking mechanical parts. It just feels uninspired and bland looking. I don't want to say ugly, except for maybe a couple of areas, but it's not something my eyes actively enjoy looking at. Gameplay-wise, we aren't doing much better. This is your standard platformer with mediocre combat thrown in the mix. The platforming at times can be fun and challenging. It doesn't help that everything is a one-hit kill, and you'll be teleported back to a safe zone immediately. While on one hand, it can make some of the more tight platforming sections less punishing, conversely, it causes any tension or actual tricky maneuvering to be lost, as I found myself mindlessly platforming sections with no real intent. Combat-wise, I thought since you can play as a large cast of characters, they'd each have different weapons and abilities. No. While it is true that visually all the attacks are different, functionally there is no skill difference in picking Bucktooth Boy over Phantom Kid. It seems like a huge missed opportunity in my eyes. The final thing to note is that back when I was describing the story, I mentioned the goal of collecting master models. Well, to gatekeep progression, you have to go back into levels you've already played to pick up some master models, in which certain characters in specific locations can only collect. Wow! What a subtle way to pad out the game's length. This is pretty bad, as it kills any desire for me to want to play this game. Playing through levels was enough once. Going back through them again makes me feel very sad and cold inside. It's clear why they did something like this, as the game only has 7 levels, which is crazy short. What a disappointment. I thought Nickelodeon was the shining star in children's entertainment. And there we go. Those are your 2022 licensed kids games picked out by Danerade. We had some fun stuff to talk about, and if you want to see me make another video in this manner, feel free to say so in the comments and possibly suggest a licensed kids game while you're at it. Both great and awful. Other than that, see you for the Christmas special.